So 37 years ago today, 241 Marines were killed by a terrorist who we found out later had attended his own funeral. He was from Iran, and the truck that he drove into the Marine barracks, which housed over 300 Marines, we found out later on was a flatbed truck with a marble base. It had gas cylinders enhanced by plastic explosives. And at that time, it was the largest non-nuclear explosion ever recorded. I remember several years later, I didn't want to talk about it, never did, until my good friend Chuck Dallahy, who was in the barracks when it blew up, and he survived, and he called me and he says, "Why are you being so selfish?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Why don't you want to talk about what happened that day?" He said, "Do you not remember what the motto is for the Beirut Veterans Association?" I said, "What is it?" He said, "Our first duty is to remember." From that day on, I continued to talk about what happened on that horrible day in 1983. But the one thing I always think about on this day is our band of brothers. Now, many of you in the audience out there probably have seen the series called Band of Brothers and think that phrase Band of Brothers came from that movie, but it did not. Band of Brothers actually came from Shakespeare, a play called King Henry V. And it's sort of a battle cry now. It's sort of a toast. It's sort of a way that we remember those who died in whatever battle. And here it is. Whoever does not have the stomach for this fight, let that man depart. Give that man his money in order to speed his departure, since we wish not to die in this man's company. And whoever shall live past today shall rouse himself every year on this day and show his neighbors his scars and tell embellished stories of his great feats of battle. And these stories shall teach his son. And from this day forward until the end of the world, we shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. Because whoever shall shed his blood with me shall be my brother.
So tell me where you were that day, what happened to you, and then walking through the rubble. You've told me the story before, but tell me again.
Okay. When the blast actually took place, I was at the American Embassy, and it was my duty to protect the embassy. I had about 100 Marines. The embassy had been attacked previously, and so my assignment was to keep it from being attacked again. I was asleep on the roof of a building within the complex of the embassy when the blast took place. I didn't think much of it because there were a lot of blasts taking place in Beirut. But immediately after that, there was another blast. And so I said to the Marine who was standing close by on guard, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I don't know, sir, but there's some very big clouds from the explosions that just happened." So I quickly got dressed. It was about 6:20 in the morning. It was on Sunday morning, although it was Saturday night here in America. I went down to the guard shack, and that's where I heard the radio chatter between two company commanders, and one of them said, "The battalion headquarters is gone." He was asked to repeat that, and he said, "It's gone." So I then immediately knew that something horrible had happened. And it took about 30 minutes before word really began to come in as to how many were possibly killed or wounded. Is that enough?
Yeah. Do you want to tell me more about when you got to the base, walking around, what you saw?
Mm-hmm. Well, well, the building, which was a 4-story building, was collapsed completely. And Marines from everywhere had assembled to try to dig out those who were buried in the rubble. Many of the Marines who died, some of them were crushed, some of them were impaled as they were blown out of the building onto trees. Some were burnt to death, some were just completely, we don't know. But I wasn't able to stay long because my responsibility of protecting the embassy required me to get back to the embassy, take care of it. You know, the mission took precedence at that particular time.
Beirut bombing of 1983 is kind of, I don't want to say a forgotten terrorist attack, but it's definitely not remembered as much as it is in our family. Why do you think that is?
You know, there are times in America's history that horrible times like that I think people don't want to remember. And that's not good. We need to remember those terrible times in history, not only just because we need to remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, just as importantly, we need to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Anything else you want to say about that day?
My gosh, there's a lot to say, but I think that's, I mean, I can tell all kinds of stories, but I think it's probably enough. Unless there's something else you want me.
No, I mean, if there's any stories that you think people need to know.
So Rogers, Nelson.
Well, I can tell you about Lance Corporal Terry Velour if you want.
Sure.
Not long after the blast, because there was not enough room on the hospital ships that were stationed in the Mediterranean just off our coast, many of the bodies were brought to the American Embassy. And there was a hospital close by, so a lot of the bodies were taken to the hospital. Those that were, those Marines that were still living were put inside the hospital. And the Marines who were guarding the embassy stood double duty so that every room housing a Marine also had a Marine standing out in front of the room guarding that Marine. It was there that I got a chance to meet Lance Corporal Terry Velour. You know, one of my favorite movies, Braveheart, there's a quote in there: "Men don't follow titles, they follow courage." And it was there that I got to witness unbelievable courage. So just before I went in to see Lance Corporal Terry Velour, the doctor stopped me and said, "Here, put on this mask and put on these gloves and put on this robe. You don't want to get him infected." And so then we went inside and there was Lance Corporal Terry Velour. Lance Corporal Velour was a Caucasian, but his skin was black. Most of his body had been burnt by the plastic explosives. The doctor asked me to help lift him up. Lance Corporal Velour's eyes were swollen shut from the concussion of the blast. So I helped the doctor to lift him up. The nurse pulled the sheets out from underneath him, and Lance Corporal Velour's skin was laying all over the sheets. And he shuddered, and you could tell it was obvious he was in a lot of pain, but he didn't complain, he didn't say anything, until the doctor asked me a question, and when I responded, Lance Corporal Velour knew that there was an American in the room. And he said, "Are you a Marine?" I said, "Yes." And he reached up to touch the flag that was sewn on my uniform. And then he reached up to touch my collar to see what rank I was. And he said immediately, "Sir, what happened? Why am I here?" And I told him that there was a horrible attack that day. He's fortunate to be alive. Can I get you anything for your pain? We were holding hands at that time, and he said no. And he started asking me about individual Marines in his unit, giving me names and ranks, wanting to know if they were alive. And I said, "Lance Corporal Velour, I don't know. Can I get you something for your pain? The doctor's here." He said, "No, sir." And he shoved my hand away. He said, "Go find out about those Marines." Well, I debated on what to do next because I didn't want to bring him bad news, because I know there was a lot of bad news. So I went to the door, began to pull it open, and Lance Corporal Velour said, "Sir?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Semper Fidelis, sir." And he said it with such strength and confidence. All I could do was respond, "Semper Fidelis, Lance Corporal Velour," and opened the door and left. Never thought I would see him again, because I thought he was about to pass. About a month or so later, I got home, and I decided I wanted to call Lance Corporal Velour's family to tell him how proud I was to have known him. And they responded by telling me that he was back at Walter Reed Hospital recovering from his wounds. He had lived. So every year on this date, we rouse ourselves, and I will contact him. We will talk, we will reminisce, as we've done every year since 1983.